Hey guys, it's Summer Tannhauser with Lady Boss League, and you're listening to the 360 Entrepreneur with Jan Ilona.
This is episode 220, and this one is all about leveraging Pinterest for your business. Here we go.
Welcome to the 360 Entrepreneur Podcast, the show for entrepreneurs and small business owners who dream big and want to do bigger. Join some of the world's top entrepreneurs, internet marketers, and best-selling authors as they share their inspiring stories, their struggles, and give actionable tips that will help you build, grow, and promote your online business. Here's your host, Yanni Lunga.
Hello. Welcome to this new episode of the 360 Entrepreneur Podcast. And today we go back and cover a topic that we haven't talked about for well over 150 episodes. I think almost 200 episodes, which is crazy. And I'm talking about Pinterest and leveraging as a social media platform that can actually help your business. And in today's interview with Summer Tannhauser from ladybossleague.com, we get advice on profile optimization, content scheduling, and leveraging Pinterest to drive traffic and eyeballs to your online business. The show notes for today's episode are over at janilunga.com/episode 220. All right, time to get started. Here's the interview with Summer Tannhauser from ladybossleague.com. Today, we are joined by a Pinterest expert, blogger, and lady boss. She teaches passionate entrepreneurs, bloggers, and small business owners how to leverage Pinterest and set up a conversion strategy to build a list, gain traffic, and increase sales. And she's going to share some of those tips here with us today. I'm so excited to welcome on the show Summer Tannhauser. Summer, how's it going?
Hey Jan, I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me today.
It's my pleasure. Welcome. And I was telling you before we started the interview that you've been on my radar for quite some time. So I'm really pumped about having you here, number one. And number two, I'm really excited about the topic of today's episode because I think we haven't covered Pinterest for something like over a year. So it's definitely good to get back to Pinterest for sure.
Yeah, that's great. It sounds like it is definitely time because there's a lot to talk about and lots of benefits to be had with using it.
Yeah, no, indeed. And I remember when you came on my radar and I started to look at what you do, I was like, yeah, it really looks like Pinterest. It's something that we can't ignore. And I'm excited, as I said, to have you here. But before we dive into the good stuff and we talk Pinterest and everything, can you take a moment to share a little bit more about yourself in case there is somebody joining us, Summer, who has no idea who today's guest expert, aka Lady Boss, is?
Absolutely. So I'm kind of a long-time entrepreneur. I started out with a local business that I've been running since 2009. And that's grown from a little side hustle all the way up to a basically employee-led company. And then I started dabbling in online business and figuring out how I could kind of leverage the power of the internet and the marketing skills and everything that I'd learned from building a business from scratch. I really wanted to figure out how I could move that to the online space. So probably about 4 to 5 years ago at this point, I opened an online business to kind of leverage my marketing skills. And it was a online, basically travel agency. So I was helping people plan their travels. And at that point, I knew I needed to dive into one social media platform and really master it and figure out how can I use this to power my business, to get new leads, to get the traffic that I needed starting from scratch in the online world. So I kind of randomly decided that Pinterest was going to be my thing. I enjoyed the platform and I was like, well, if I can make this work, this would be awesome. I already love it. And,
Right.
and let's do this. So I really dove all in with using it as the marketing machine for this business. And about a year later, my results, that were coming in is that over 75% of my paying clients for this business were coming directly from finding me on Pinterest. So it was basically my, number one traffic driver, lead driver, client driver. And I just saw the power that it could have for almost any online business that's looking to get people in the door in some form or fashion. And so that's when I really decided, hey, I actually enjoy kind of the marketing side, the teaching side. My background's in education. And I realized that I was really passionate about teaching others how to do this. And so that's when I made that transition. And now at Lady Boss League, I focus on Pinterest and sales funnels and lead conversion and kind of all those things that small businesses online need to understand to really make it work.
Thank you, Summer, for telling us a little bit more about yourself. And you mentioned the online business about traveling. And is it so that you had or still have a business related to dogs? Is it correct?
Yes, that's my local business that was my first kind of run at entrepreneurship in 2009. And I still run it. I still manage it. I've got a team of 15 part-time employees that basically run it for me at this point. And so it's kind of what I call my lifestyle business that, provides me a nice income on very part-time hours and allows me to put my focus now more on my passion, which is on the online world.
All right, nice. I like that how you, like your background. I mean, you said you have a background in education, you have experience with your online business in traveling, your local business with the dog side of things, and then you also have your online business over at Lady Boss League. And it's interesting, Summer, because in your answer, as you were telling us more about your story, you actually already busted a myth, which is that Pinterest isn't just for people or women looking for recipes and wedding dresses, but you said that Pinterest can do great things for many different types of online businesses, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the main thing is getting that traffic to your website. And it is amazing because people use Pinterest basically as a search engine. It's like Google, but visual Google. So, people are on there searching for all different types of keywords and phrases and questions that they have that, can easily relate to your business and what you're trying to accomplish. And so if you're sharing content on Pinterest visually through your pins and linking that content back to highly informative articles or content on your website or blog, then you're naturally leading those people to exactly what they want to see. And, this isn't just people stumbling across your work. It's people that were actually searching for this exact topic. So that's really why I love it so much, is because you get really targeted traffic coming to your business or to your blog.
Wow, I love it. And I think the first question I have to ask you, Summer, when it comes to Pinterest is, I know through your work, through using Pinterest yourself, you've probably seen hundreds or even thousands of different profiles. So what would you say are some of the things we should think about and do with our profile, with our Pinterest profile? And maybe if you could also mention a couple of common mistakes that we should really try to avoid making.
Sure. So if you're kind of starting from, you've always used Pinterest as a personal platform and you're like, well, I want to make the change. I want to use this as a marketing tool now. So kind of the first thing you're going to do is do a kind of a overhaul of your profile. So no longer should you be thinking about your Pinterest profile as your personal pin board. It's now all about attracting that ideal person or ideal audience member that you want to come to your website. So you've got to think about what type of topics are they interested in? What type of boards do they want to see on your profile? What's your aesthetic going to be? So, it's a first impression, just like anything. So we want to make sure that we've got a very nice looking overall aesthetic that makes that person want to actually come back and visit our website. From there, you've got to know that Pinterest is a search engine. So we already said a little bit about keywords. So I'm going to figure out what keywords I want to be found for on Pinterest. And I'm going to start making sure that those are basically every place I can in my profile. So I've got my board names. There are these keywords. I've written a profile description, kind of your about section, that makes it clear that I'm a business that says, hey, here's what I do. Here's what I provide and here's my website basically. And once again, making sure the keywords are in there. And also your actual, what it's called your business name on Pinterest. So a lot of people, if they've, had a personal profile, maybe they just have their name up there, or maybe you've made the change and actually put your business or blog name up there, but you really need to take it another step and include some keywords after that describe what it is that your business or blog does or what it talks about, so that you're that much more likely to get found when people are searching for that topic. So that's kind of like the first thing that you need to be thinking about is how can I turn my profile into something that's going to attract those ideal people? Just as if you're doing Instagram, you're going to make sure your entire Instagram feed is on brand. The same thing with Pinterest, making sure your profile is on brand and really bringing in those people that you want to attract to your business.
I like it. So would you say, Summer, that we have to kind of make a shift in the way we approach the profile and start to move the focus from me as a person to my prospects, the people I'm trying to reach on Pinterest?
Exactly. Yes. And so I'm going to think about, I'm going to have boards that are specifically related to my business and my business focus, but I'm also going to think slightly outside of that. I'm going to think, what are some other related topics that these people would also be interested in? So, if I'm focused on blogging, are they also interested in social media or, sales funnels or whatever it is, these related topics? And I'm going to make sure I'm putting boards on those related topics to give them this overall profile that attracts them. And I can still have some boards that maybe are more specifically about me and my business. So if I'm going to be a solopreneur brand, maybe I do still have a board that really showcases just my work, just my blog content, maybe even some things from my about page. Or if you're a service-based brand, maybe you have a board that's all your portfolio work, showcasing all the client work you've done. So you can definitely still do some things like that kind of give a little more insight into you, your personality, and your brand. But those are going to be the more limited boards, and you're doing it very strategically. More so, you're really focused on the people that you want to attract.
I love it. Thank you for introducing the concept of boards into the conversation, Summer. I mean, you mentioned different aspects or different pieces of the profile puzzle. So you mentioned the name, there is the description, there are the different boards, and then there is also the content. So we can think about the content we may already discuss on our blog or podcast or things like that, as well as related topics, related content we think people we are trying to reach may be interested in. And when it comes to the actual content that we post on Pinterest, Summer, do you have anything to share? I mean, it's right that on Pinterest we can share images as well as videos, as well as audio, for example, through SoundCloud.
Yeah. So basically, Pinterest really lends itself to this kind of one type of standard, what I call Pinterest optimized image. And it's going to be a vertical image, and it has a ratio aspect of approximately 600 to 900 pixels. You can make that longer. You can make it a little bit shorter, but keeping, in the same kind of ratio. And the main goal of this is to really provide a bunch of information directly on the pin. So if you're pinning a video directly from YouTube, let's say, it's not going to show up very well on the Pinterest platform. It's going to come up as a small horizontal video type screen, and people just aren't clicking on it on Pinterest. It's just one of those things. People have not made that jump yet. So, what I always suggest doing is, if no matter what your content is, whether it be a blog post or, like you said, a podcast episode or a YouTube video, I actually suggest creating of that Pinterest optimized image. So it's going to be vertical. It's probably going to have some form of the title of your content directly on the pin image. And it's going to be very clear what the person's going to find if they click through and what they're going to learn. So, with a blog, you can often have that image actually embedded in your blog post. But even with something like a podcast episode or a YouTube video, what you can do is you can create that image separately. So, using a free platform online like Canva or PicMonkey makes it really easy. And then you're going to actually just upload that image directly to Pinterest and make sure you're linking it then, link that pin back to that podcast episode or whatever it is you're linking it to. And so you're able to get that image on Pinterest linking to your content, even if that image isn't going to be directly, on your YouTube video or something like that.
Great. Thank you for that, Summer. You mentioned a couple of tools like Canva. You mentioned PicMonkey. I'll make sure to link to everything we're covering here in the show notes. And is it okay if I link to your Pinterest profile as well so people have it as a reference?
Sure, that'd be no problem. And yeah, Canva and PicMonkey, those are real easy tools to get started with. I don't want anybody to ever feel like they have to be this expert graphic designer or go out and purchase Photoshop to make this happen. You really can do this with free tools and really have great success. So there shouldn't be anything holding someone back there.
Okay, and I'm curious, Summer, if we stick to content for a second before moving on to a different aspect of Pinterest, when it comes to the an image we pin, so you talked about the visual component of the content, and what about the caption or description? Because I know that we can add some text there. How should we go about it? For example, if we wanted to we pin an image for a blog post or for a podcast episode, should we just write one sentence, or should we really kind of expand and maybe write a short kind of excerpt of the blog post or podcast episode and maybe a link? How should we go about the textual part of the Pinterest content?
Sure. So it's actually very interesting because Pinterest seems to always be making changes on how they display images on their accounts. Right. And if you go to your mobile browser versus your desktop browser, and even if you check different people's accounts, you are going to see things displayed in different ways. So they like to test things out on certain accounts and not others. But what it looks like they're going towards right now is going to the focus just on the image. So they first shortened the description of the image that you were going to see on the platform. And on some accounts, they've actually taken away the description altogether. So take that with a grain of salt. It seems that's the direction they're going in, but of course, nobody can predict exactly what they're going to do. With that said, what I like to do is I always like to just put a short description. I used to suggest a longer one, but now since they've seemed to be moving away from the lengthy descriptions, I suggest just writing a one sentence description that's going to make sure it's got some keywords in it, especially towards the beginning of that sentence, if you can, as well as making sure that when you do upload that actual image to your blog post, if you are putting this as part of a blog post, making sure you've got a good description in the alt text as you upload it, because that's going to be that description that automatically gets populated to Pinterest when somebody pins the image from your blog. So just making sure that you've written, one nice sentence that you're happy with being shared, keyword rich, and that's going to be your best bet at this point, regardless of what Pinterest does. You've still got it there in case it's being shown on an account. And if it's not, you've still got the majority of your content directly on the image.
Great. You heard what Summer just shared with us. Make sure to follow those steps so that you know that your content and really every piece of content you post on Pinterest is going to be optimized regardless, as Summer said, regardless of what Pinterest does in terms of changing things. And Summer, I have one more question for you when it comes to the content side of the discussion, which is our own content versus curated content. I know that we can pin content from, I could pin content from your blog to my own Pinterest board and so forth. So do you have any insights when it comes to content? Should we focus on our own content since we want to drive traffic, or should we start to curate content? How do we combine the two and find kind of the quote unquote right balance?
Sure. So you're definitely going to need to do a mix of both, because if you focused on just your own content, number one, you would likely run out of pins way too quickly without starting to repeat them. And it would just, not look good at all. And no one wants to look at an account that is only just one person's, it just looks self-promotional.
Right.
And you've got to include some curated, really nice content. I always make sure I'm pinning images that are high quality and seem to go back to high quality content as well. I do always make sure I have one board on my profile, and it's normally going to be the very first one where I do label it as the name of my blog, and I only put my own content into that board. So it's going to house all of my blog articles in there, so that if somebody came to my profile and really wants to see what I'm all about, they can go to that first board and check out everything I've got. But in my other boards, I'm going to make sure it's a mix of my own content and other content, just to keep things flowing, keep things fresh, and have a nice mix there.
Great. Summer, I'm really enjoying this conversation, and I'm sure that for everybody tuning in, listening to what we're talking about here and checking your Pinterest profile at the same time is going to help a lot, because we're talking about a pretty visual topic. So I'm sure that having your profile there as an example, as the North Star, is definitely gonna help. And I know that Pinterest is a platform that can really come in handy when it comes to driving traffic. And obviously you shared your own experience, Summer. And I'm curious, do you have any advice, any strategies we can implement to, once we have built our profile and we started to populate it with content, that we can leverage, strategies we can leverage to drive traffic from Pinterest back to our website, or anyways to our content?
Sure. So making sure that when you've actually taken the time to create these Pinterest optimized pins for your own content, that you're going to be sharing them more than once on Pinterest. So I see a lot of people make this mistake. They say, hey, I've created this pin. I'm going to pin it on Pinterest. Okay, I'm done. It doesn't work that way, because Pinterest rewards accounts that are active. And the more you're actually keeping your own content pins flowing through, being repinned and being added to new boards on your account, the more likely those pins are going to show up in other people's search results, in their smart feed, which is just that kind of big feed of pins that they see when they first log on to Pinterest. So you've got to find ways to keep resharing your content. So that might be that you have some very specific board topics and more general board topics, so that one pin fits in multiple places. You might be joining some group boards where multiple people contribute to it, and you can share some of your own pins there. But you've got to make sure that you're keeping it fresh and keeping it in that rotation, and you can't just do it once. So that would be kind of my biggest mistake or tip, I would say, about when you do have your content ready. Just make sure it's continuously going out there.
Okay, so to double down on what you just said, Summer, did you mean to post something in a board and then to pin something in a board and then repin it in relevant boards we may have?
Yeah. So, I'm not going to do it all at the same time.
Right.
I would take that one pin, and maybe this week or this day, I go ahead and notice that it fits into this board category. So I'm going to pin it into this specific board. But maybe I've got another board category that it also would fit into, because, there's a lot of topics that overlap in different ways. And I'm going to see if I can pin it into another board that makes sense as well. Now, that's not always possible, and that's fine as well. You absolutely can have the same pin in a board multiple times. Just making sure you've got enough other content in between that pin, so it just doesn't look like they're right beside each other, or you notice
Right.
that, you're repeating all the time or whatnot. But, most people, they're not doing a deep dive into your boards, as I call it. it. They're not coming to your profile and going into a bunch of your boards and scrolling through them. They're so much more likely to have one of your pins show up when they search for a topic or show up in their smart feed. And that's how they're making it back to your website. So it's so much more important just to get it out there versus, worrying about how every single individual board looks.
Wow, thank you so much. I'd never thought about that, I have to admit. So I'm definitely looking forward to getting started with that approach and try to repurpose some of the content I have in a board into a different one. And speaking of boards, you mentioned some boards where other people can contribute as well. So what is your take on those kind of boards? I mean, you mentioned them. They can be great for us to share our own content, but we can even create one and invite people to contribute to it. So what would you say? What role would you say those kind of boards? I'm sorry, I don't remember the technical term to refer to them as. How do they fit, or how can they fit into an overall Pinterest strategy for businesses?
Yeah, so they're just called group boards, basically. Okay. So it's a group of people contributing to that same board, and you'll find that there's a lot of them in certain industries that are very established already. So if you're in the kind of the blogging or small business industry, there's a good amount of group boards out there that you could potentially join. Now, I will say that it used to be a couple years ago that group boards were all the rage on Pinterest. They drove tons of traffic, and it was like you had to be on group boards if you wanted to see success. It seems as though Pinterest kind of caught on and realized they needed to reel this back in a little bit, and group boards are not seeing the results and the traffic that they used to. However, with that said, I still do think it's a good strategy to find some group boards to be a part of, but just don't put all your eggs into one basket. So I'm going to make sure I'm still focusing on my personal boards as well as those group boards I'm contributing to. And it's basically just another way to have another place to put my content pins out into the Pinterest world and have another place to share them and have them potentially get picked up by more people and repinned and people visit them. And so I do think it's a good strategy. I do like to check in on my analytics. So you can check in on either, directly on Pinterest has analytics built into it, or if you're using a Pinterest scheduling program, a lot of those have analytics. And so I do like to see, are there certain group boards that are really working for me and getting me traffic? Are there other ones that aren't? And so I can decide if there's ones I want to leave or ones I really want to focus in more on.
Great. And you just mentioned Pinterest scheduling tools. So now I'm curious, can you talk a little bit about those? I mean, obviously we all know what a scheduling tool is for, but does timing matter in terms of when we pin on Pinterest, whether we pin in the morning, our time zone, afternoon, evening? And do you have maybe also a couple of examples of scheduling tools for Pinterest that we can look at?
Sure. So the two biggest names out there in terms of scheduling tools are pretty much Tailwind or Board Booster. And I personally use Tailwind in my own business. It's got quite a few benefits. And if you're really going to get serious about a Pinterest strategy, you more than likely are going to want to invest in a scheduling program. Mm-hmm. They only run about $5 to $15 per month. And the amount of time it really saves me is definitely worth that small investment. What it allows me to do is it allows me to not have to worry about trying to make sure I'm remembering to jump on Pinterest every single day and do some pinning. And it's just one of those things that, gets pushed to the back burner and you're like, oh, I'll do it tomorrow. And then, that never happens. And it's with a scheduling tool, I can go in once a week, once a month, my VA can go in, whatever it is, and go ahead and get my whole schedule pinned out, scheduled out, and Tailwind actually tells me the optimal times based on my account for my pins to be going out. So it actually, analyzes that all for me. And then I can tell it, okay, I want you to pin 20 times on this specific day. And it's going to go ahead and pick those best 20 times for me in terms of when my pins are getting the most engagement historically. And so it just makes it really easy and really quick to do versus me trying to go in and do that manually every single day. And it's also got some really great analytics that help me make sure that I'm spending my time in the right places and figure out, what pin images are working and which ones aren't. And so it just is really a time saver as well as, helps me kind of analyze my full strategy.
Wow, Summer, my headphones are really on fire from what you just shared. So you mentioned a couple of options. I'll link to those as well. And speaking of tools, I know that you have a freebie, the 10 must-have Pinterest tools. So I'll link to that in the show notes page as well, that I think is definitely worth looking into. If, as you said, we are serious about leveraging Pinterest, then there are a few tools that can help with us. And we covered quite some ground, Summer. You told us more about your story, your different businesses. You told us that Pinterest isn't just for wedding dresses and cookies. You talked about some of the things to think about and do to optimize our profile. We covered the content side of things. You shared a strategy for driving traffic. And do you have any tips maybe in terms of how we can leverage Pinterest to grow our email list, so to generate leads?
Definitely. So the thing you've got to remember about Pinterest is that its main goal is driving the traffic for you. Right. So, it's not going to be the one building your email list. So you've really got to think about it in terms of, okay, I can share amazing content on Pinterest and I can do all of my strategy there to get the traffic back to my website. But then I've got to make sure basically those blog articles that I've linked to on Pinterest, that they're really doing their job as well. So I need to make sure my blog articles are, have plenty of different opt-in points for that freebie that's hopefully related directly to that blog article that the person came from Pinterest to find. The stronger connection you can make there between the free content they're reading and the opt-in or upgrade that you're offering them for getting on your email list. The closer that connection is, the more likely it is they're going to opt in. And it's important to know that almost 80% of Pinterest traffic comes from the mobile device. So I always encourage people to, go ahead and get on their blogger website on their mobile device, double check everything, make sure it's really easy to opt into your freebies and your content upgrades on a cell phone, because a lot of people forget that. And, you've got this pop-up, popping up and blocking stuff, or, the buttons are too small, and just making sure it's as easy as possible for them to take the action that you want once they have made it to your website from Pinterest.
Wow. I love, Summer, what you just shared, because you talked about the importance of optimizing our own content for list building purposes. So you said blog posts have different touch points, and you said that 80% of Pinterest users are actually using the platform through mobile, which means that if we want to use Pinterest to generate leads, we have to make sure that our website, our content, and our email list entry points, opt-in forms, and things like that are optimized for mobile. And Summer, you mentioned your site, ladybossleague.com. I know you are on, Pinterest, obviously, you're on Twitter as well. And if somebody would like to connect with you to say thank you, to give you a virtual high five, or maybe even to work with you, what would you say is the best way to do that?
Yeah, you can go to my website, ladybossleague.com, and there is definitely a contact form there, and I definitely respond to emails, so feel free to fill that out, and I will get back with you. Or you can find me on pretty much any social media platform using the username at Lady Boss League. So easy to find me any place you're at, and I'll definitely get back with you.
Great. Summer, thank you so much for your time, for being here, for your energy, for your expertise. I had a fantastic time chatting with you.
This was great, Jan. I really appreciate you having me on for this. This was tons of info, and I know people can really get value out of this if they take action on it.
Exactly. And speaking of taking action and value, I have one final question for you, Summer, because I know I mentioned your freebie, 10 must-have Pinterest tools, but you have another freebie, which I think is the perfect next step to this conversation, which is your Pinterest Power 5-day free course. So can you take a second to tell everybody a little bit more about what they can expect by joining Pinterest Power?
Yeah, it's really great. It's kind of my big opt-in, and I've had thousands of people literally go through it. And what it's going to do is it's really going to help you understand how to get your profile set up, make some of those basic changes that I talked about in this interview to change from a non-marketing profile to actually one that works for your business, and also how to create that first Pinterest image. So if you feel like you're a little stuck on the design part of it, it's going to talk about how to get that image created, as well as really giving you a routine of here's what you can do every single day to kind of get your Pinterest platform working for you and starting to gain that momentum. So it's going to take you through all of that over 5 days. And it's really valuable. A lot of people, really shout the praises of it and are able to get results just from going through it. So
perfect. So thank you, Summer, for that as well. You heard it. Everything Summer Tannhauser and I have talked about is in the show notes page. All right, we are back. You heard Pinterest can do a lot of things for your business, and Summer mentioned a couple of free resources she has that can really help you jumpstart your Pinterest marketing efforts. If you're interested in getting started with Pinterest, or perhaps you've been using Pinterest to no avail, you haven't gotten the results you wish for, make sure to check out the show notes page for today's episode over at yanilunga.com/episode 220. And there you're going to find the links to the 2 free resources Summer mentioned. In next week's episode, we do a similar thing than today. So we go back and cover a topic that we haven't talked about for a long time. And that's another social media platform. And I'm talking about LinkedIn. Are you curious to hear more about what LinkedIn can do for your business and how you can actually unlock its potential? If so, you have to come back next week for a new episode of the 360 Entrepreneur Podcast.
Thank you for listening to the 360 Entrepreneur Podcast. For more tips and tools, head over to www.yanilunga.com.